Hello, I'm Justine Willis-Toms. Welcome to the New Dimensions Cafe. Today I'm hosting Faye Cox and John Fullerton. They are collaborators on the first book of Hourbooks Press, and it's called Regenerative Economics, Creating Conditions for Health and Abundance on a Living Planet. I'm speaking with Faye and John in their homes by remote connection. Welcome, Faye and John, to the New Dimensions Cafe.
It is so good to be here. Thank you, Justine.
Great to be with you, Justine.
Great.
Hi, Faye.
Hi, John.
Yeah, they're miles apart. Faye is in British Columbia, and John, I believe, is in Connecticut, and I'm in Northern California. Isn't it wonderful? We can all be together here. I would like to start off with, when we're talking about regenerative economics, let's start off with what is the current Newtonian view of economics, and then move that into how the world would work if we looked at it as a human culture economics.
So I'll jump in, Faye, maybe. I think in real simple terms, economics as a discipline is built on the idea that the economy is a machine to be optimized for money, and that is understood to be the source of our prosperity. And it does a lot of things really, really magically and brilliantly in terms of organizing resources to create products and services for human needs. But at the core, the design principle is the design of a machine to be controlled and optimized. And a regenerative economy would be understood as a living organism where the goal would be to create the conditions for health in a much less controlling way. It would design an economy to participate in the magical process of how life works, which is the I think the key insight of this idea is that the economy is a living organism, not a machine.
Yeah, and when we go to the root of the word economy, eco, it's the same as in ecology. And I was so happy to learn that oikos, eco, means home. And so we're talking about the management of the home and acknowledgement of the home. And I think that lands this whole notion of how an economy could actually be regenerative instead of degenerative, which is what we're living in now. We don't want to get where this road is taking us as we're degenerating our home through running the economy as a machine.
If economics were a proper science, the results of the polycrisis, what we call the polycrisis, would be understood as the falsification of the underlying theory. It would be deemed false, and we would be searching for a new theory. But for some reason, we just argue about our political beliefs rather than throwing out the fundamental theory, which is built on the Newtonian logic of a machine or a clockwork universe. But for some reason that I couldn't explain to your listeners, we don't do that. We just argue with each other about capitalism versus socialism. They're both built on the same Newtonian machine.
Well, I think part of that, Faye and John, might be that as a human species, we resist change. And crisis actually is the birthplace of profound change. And as you say, we're in a polycrisis situation right now on the earth today. So how can we be encouraged to release all our concepts of how the world works, how economies work, and be participants in this profound change that is going on right now on the planet?
I draw real hope, realistic hope, I call it, from knowing that just as we are in this crisis. I mean, how many times have you heard the word existential lately? Um, in the midst of this crisis, it's happening as this new knowledge about the interconnection of our universe, from nanoparticles to galaxies. We now know it's all connected. And this knowledge, which resonates completely with the spiritual wisdom of all the ages, is coming just at the time of this crisis. So that gives me a sense that just what we need is coming just in time.
Yeah. I guess what I'd add, Justine, is that it's helpful. It's been helpful to me to learn that humanity's been through a shift like this before. There's a lot of parallels between the shift from the medieval age to the modern age. And it took 90 years after Copernicus put his theory out that the Earth is not the center of the universe. It took 90 years for Galileo to prove it with his telescope. And the powers that be put him in house arrest and told him not to talk about it. So that the worldview shift from a earth-centered go to church and be told what to do, and then you go to heaven or you go to hell, that was our worldview at the time. And then we freed ourselves from that with the scientific revolution and all of the progress we've made. But it turns out we're not as smart as we thought we were. And so, as Faye mentioned, this is the first time since the separation in the West, I should emphasize, the separation between the church dogma and the scientific, things we could figure out scientifically. We're now living at this moment where our latest science is affirming not the dogma of a particular church, but the wisdom traditions that have stood the test of time. But it's not going to happen necessarily in our lifetimes. Like, this is a big, big deal. And so I've taken comfort from the idea that it's a privilege to live at this moment of time and participate in this transformation, even though this is not a problem that any of us can fix by changing our behavior on Tuesday. It's way bigger than that. And unfortunately, we've been led to think that our leaders their job is to solve problems, whether they're business leaders or government leaders. And this is just the next problem we're going to solve. Well, that's completely naive and underestimates the scale of change that we're going through.
So if we're not solving problems, what are we solving?
Well, I would say the first thing we need to do is gain much deeper understanding of what's happening. And the problems we look to, whether it's climate change or inequality or biodiversity loss, or now our divisive politics, the first thing we need to do is understand these are symptoms of a much deeper problem. And we are using the term polycrisis a lot. Some people are using the term metacrisis, which is in a sense a metaphysical crisis. The language that I have heard and like is our myth of separation. We've grown up thinking that we're separate from each other and that we're separate from this thing we call nature, when in fact our latest scientific understanding, quantum entanglement, which is now accepted science, Nobel Prize accepted science, is affirming our ancient wisdom traditions that everything is connected to everything and that this idea of oneness is actually what reality is. And so the fact that our energy system is generating CO2 emissions that creates climate change is rooted in the fact that we didn't understand that there'd be an effect of everything we do, including burning fossil fuels. So it's really an educational challenge. It's a shift in worldview it's actually bigger than a shift in culture. It's way bigger than our day-to-day, squabbling about, are you a conservative or a liberal, and it's this capitalism or socialism. Like we're metaphorically we're sitting in Plato's cave, not seeing reality. And so I think we have to begin to get a grip on what's actually happening. And the hopeful piece for me, at least, is that one of the implications of quantum entanglement and this idea that everything's connected to everything is that everything we do and everything we intend and everything we don't do, decide not to do, will affect the outcome, even though we'll never know how. We have to let go of this idea of I can control it and I can find the solution, and know that what we're doing, including this conversation, will impact the outcome of this moment of big change.
I love the long-term view that you are taking, that you're saying, wait, we may not see the results of our participation immediately. We may not even see it in our lifetime. Patience, I guess, is what is called for here.
I want to speak to the big shift from solving problems to creating conditions. That's even the title. Creating conditions for health and abundance on a living planet. So when we're seeing fullness from wholeness within us, then what we're doing is of a completely different nature. And creating conditions involves trusting that life knows what it's doing, creating conditions for life to work. And just saying that, the understanding we have now of how life works is coming just when we most deeply need it. And I want to read this quote from Václav Havel, that we can be hopeful. Hope is definitely not the same thing as optimism. It is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense, regardless of how it turns out. And, in this time of incredible crisis, polycrisis, meta crisis, we now know there is something that really makes sense. And we can steer ourselves more towards that.
And so what you're saying is participate anyway.
Absolutely.
Go for it anyway.
Absolutely.
Give your gifts. Do not hold back. And I think that's one of your principles. Our success is not so much dependent on the money we make, but there's another kind of true wealth.
Health of the whole I think, gives us a much deeper sense of what true wealth is. I love this phrase, hidden in plain sight. There's tremendous potential hidden in plain sight that we're not even touching in our extractive, separated mindset. And as we shift to this sense of wheel, of health of the whole, there is just tremendous potential, healing, regenerative potential to be released.
So do you both feel positive toward the direction we're going right now?
Well, I mean, it's tough to look at the day-to-day reality and be anything but aghast. But one of the things I learned when I started studying system science is that systems only change in response to pressure. So, we were failing at shifting the system through our audacious goals and good intentions and voluntary this, that, and the other thing, and our SDGs and our ESG and all that stuff. The pressure is now accelerating, and in nature there's a thing called a disturbance. Think of a forest fire, and forest fires aren't fun when you're a tree living through them. You may not survive, but they do create the conditions for health and abundance that comes out the other end. And so when I started this, I would question myself, do we really live in this special moment? Isn't that kind of self-important thinking? And now I have no doubt that we're living through a radical disturbance, and even what's happening in our politics is, in a sense, blowing up a system that was built in the wrong design, and we weren't going to blow it up ourselves. So maybe there's even a light in a benefit of that, even though I think we're we're very troubled at what's happening in the immediate term. But that's a necessary piece of the scale of transformation we're going through. But I just want to say one thing on your wealth question. I mean, I don't want to sound like, it's pretty privileged to sit here and say money is not equal wealth. And we live in an economic system where money is an essential, and most people, 99% of us, are living without enough money to live a basic life. And so that's another symptom of a design flaw. There's no reason we need to have a system where 90% of the people in the richest country in the world feel like they don't have enough money to pay their bills and whatnot. And that's because we've left out of the economic system our shared abundance, both our natural abundance and the co-inherited wealth of the cumulative progress of human technologies. All of those technologies are sitting outside any kind of a governance system that we might call a commons. And so, whether you're a technologist or a financier, you can extract from that at no cost for your selfish benefit. Whereas it's, think of it, Peter Barnes has a beautiful book called Ours, and he talks about this co-inherited wealth, both natural and technological, that is, it's somehow not, it's outside the private market system, and it's not managed for the benefit of future generations. But the abundance of that is, and the source of wealth in that is, it's 5 times the size of the private economy, but it's not in the economy because we haven't structured the economy to include it. So we're in a hard period, and it's probably going to last. It's probably going to get worse. I'm sure it's going to get worse before it gets better, and it may be getting worse for the rest of our lifetimes. So I think we need to be very, wise, eyes wide open about this. But maybe a final thing I'd just say, I've learned as a former banker who didn't spend much time thinking about how to be helpful to other people, the wealth I've created personally for myself in teaching a course and in helping people blows away the value of the wealth I created when I worked on Wall Street. And most people who work on Wall Street or in technology don't have the experience of doing, it sounds trite, but doing for others is incredibly wealth creating for me personally. So I just think we need a new lens to look at the world we're living in and not be trapped in the culture that we've created for ourselves.
I love what you both are saying, and it just reminds me, it's just such a great point to go out on, is what you've done is reached out to others in community. So you're not isolating yourself. And I think that is partly what we're doing now, is encouraging one another to be in conversation and dialogue and helping one
Absolutely.
another and being in community.
Absolutely.
I love that. I
Well,
just
and the
want to
community you've built here for 50 years is an extraordinary example of one.
thank you. Thank you. It's been our privilege to be doing this work in the first place. So I want to thank you both for being part of the New Dimensions Cafe today. I've been talking with John Fullerton and Faye Cox. They're collaborators on the first book of the Hourbooks Press, and it's called Regenerative Economics, Creating Conditions for Health and Abundance on a Living Planet. And if you want to learn more about John Fullerton and his book, he is a founder of the nonprofit organization Capital Institute. And you can go to capitalinstitute.org to find out more about him. And to learn more about the book that John and Faye have co-authored, go to hourbooks.com. Or you can get there through the New Dimensions website, newdimensions.org, where you'll find more than 2,000 programs in our archive. I'm Justine Willis-Toms. I want to thank you for joining us at the New Dimensions Cafe, and I invite you, please do join us again.